Welcome, everyone. I'm Ann Petrick, Senior Director of Research at Vistage. A recent Vistage CEO survey revealed that finding talent is one of the biggest challenges currently facing CEOs of small and mid-sized businesses. This indicates that the talent wars are heating up again as the SMBs search for the talent needed to maximize recovery. In fact, our October survey showed that 59% of CEOs plan to expand their workforce in the next 12 months. As unemployment continues to drop, this presents new but familiar challenges for SMBs looking for talent. With that as a backdrop for the state of hiring today, I'm pleased to welcome Insperity's Jill Chapman to discuss how to future-proof your talent acquisition strategies. As a senior performance consultant with Insperity Recruiting Services, Jill helps businesses find the best talent with the latest insights and best practices in employment branding, talent attraction methods, leveraging technology, adapting to changes to both candidate requirements and the new skills needed to succeed. Jill, we look forward to learning from you. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Insperity and Vistage, we've had a great relationship and enjoy our partnership. So let's just get started, right? I think when we think about 2020, it's been the year that we just had to throw out the playbook, right? We're rethinking, we're reimagining, we're rearranging to survive first and now learning to thrive, right? So the suddenness of all the shifts that we had to go through, that was terribly disruptive. We had to rethink our workplaces, we had to rethink our work processes, all of our routines. And honestly, we were moving that direction even before the pandemic. You know, we had begun to think about remote working. Wouldn't that be cool if we could all do that? Wouldn't it be really interesting if we could add all these layers of technology to our processes and what we do? But it was like suddenly we were thrown into the deep end, right? And whatever worked before, we know it's not exactly going to work that way now. We need a different level of performance. We need to upskill our folks. We need to reskill some folks. We need to build in some new competencies. And in order to be able to do that, we've got to reshape how it is that we're going to attract and retain talent, which is our most valuable asset, you know, for our organization. So today, our conversation is going to be about talent, because when you have that right talent fit, you're going to increase your profitability, your performance, your productivity, all the things that are necessary for a successful business. But it means that we need to take a close look, and the time is right now to take a close look at our company cultures, our recruiting strategies, our hiring processes. So we're going to talk a lot today. As has been mentioned before, please use the chat. Let's make this interactive. Let's make this valuable to you. But here's some of the things that we want to talk about today. We want to talk about the steps to talent attraction. You know, as the talent war is heating up, then we need to know what we need to do to be able to bring the right folks to us. So we want to talk about the steps of talent attraction. And then we want the recruiting experience to be a good one, right? When we bring them to us, we want them to have a great experience, because even if it doesn't work out for some of our talent, it doesn't work out right now, they can have a tremendous influence on you know, how other people see your company. So whether we're doing in-person or remote recruiting, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tips for a smooth process. And then we'll end up talking a little bit more about how the pandemic has impacted the future of work and the employee expectations for the future, right? It didn't just change how we were currently doing our work or how we've conducted ourselves, but it's going to change how we're going to operate in the future. And it's more than just remote working, right? So let's get started. Let's start talking, because you know, at the end of the day, placing just anybody in a position, that's not hard, right? But finding the people who are going to take you to the next level, that's a whole nother story, right? Because these people are the heart of what makes your business successful. And I'm always surprised when people take a little bit of a lackadaisical approach to identifying the right folks for their organization, because, you know, I can have a business, you can have a business. The difference between my business and your business is that, well, it's the people. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing the right kind of people, right? That we're attracting the right kind of talent. And so that means that we're going to have to look at our company culture, our recruiting tactics, our hiring processes. Now, if I was a better presenter, we'd probably have a poll right here or a test, but I'm not. So let's just ask ourselves these things. Answer true or false in your head. Candidates are going to seek information about your employment brand from other sources if you don't make it available. True? False? Without a developed employment brand, you may experience issues attracting and retaining the type of employees that work best in your environment. True or false? And an effective employment brand illustrates how you foster your company culture. True or false? Well, they're all true, right? And so congratulations if you answer true to everything, because you understand the importance of having an employment brand for your business. Your employment brand answers the question, why would somebody want to work for your company over a competitor? And a clear employment brand spells out not only the benefits you offer to your employees, but also your company's value and culture. So here's how you define your employment brand. You're going to start with an outline of your company's core values, as you've described them, you and your leadership team. So begin to articulate those core values. Explain what makes you special. Show the ways that you foster that culture in your organization. You know, casual dress, flex hours, community involvement, dedication to work-life balance, whatever those things may be, but be able to demonstrate or articulate those with your marketplace. Do some research within your own company. Maybe use a focus group or gather together some of your highest performers, because they can tell you why they came to the organization, why they stay with the organization, and how you can find other people just like them. You also want to keep an eye to what's going on out in the marketplace, right? Making sure that you're doing a competitive analysis. How do you stack up to the other players in your market? Figure out what those key drivers are in your particular market so that you can know better what you're supposed to highlight in your organization. Because as Ann said earlier, this is a big deal, right? This is important to folks. And the talent wars are heating up. I know we read headlines, we see high unemployment numbers, but the reality behind those numbers is they're not as high as they look. Some of the folks represented in those numbers have just been furloughed, so they're not actively looking for new work, right? They're waiting to get called back by their employer. We've got some people in some jurisdictions that have gotten an increase by going on unemployment, so they're not necessarily ready to get off of that anytime soon, especially if they think that there may be some extensions in play for that unemployment. And then when we really peel back the numbers, we find that most of those that have shown up on the unemployment rolls are those people from very specific industries. And so if that's not transferable talent for you, there's an issue there as well. So again, important to know what's going on outside of your business so that you can work on the things inside. And I think when we're talking about that top talent, we need to know who they are. Right? And they're people who are focused on what you can offer them, right? It's much more than a paycheck. They want to know your company culture. They want to know your values. They want to know your mission, because they're seeking careers that are in tune with their particular needs. So here's some ways that you might be able to catch their attention. Well, develop your reputation, right? Because they're looking for companies who care about their employees and who would give their employees the tools that they need to thrive. So make sure that you're sharing your company's values, your culture, marketing that brand as what sets you apart. You be proactive about this, because in the absence of you taking a proactive approach, your brand is going to get decided for you. So why wouldn't you want to drive those conversations? Why wouldn't you want to be out front and not leave that to chance or to other people's opinions about what your values might be? You also want to make sure that you have avenues to connect with top talent via social media, right? Because they're connected online. So post your job openings on your social networks, post them on job boards and your company website, but stay active in the social media arena. You also want to make sure that whatever you're doing is authentic, because before they ever engage with you, they're going to do some research, right? They're going to find out about you. This is a big decision in their lives. It's just like us buying it's bigger, really, than us buying a car or a new cell phone or some of the latest technology. We're going to do our research. Well, I kid you not, candidates are going to do research on you as well. So you want to make sure that those messages that are out there are truly authentic, that what they see when they engage with you is exactly what they thought that they were going to, find. Some ways that you can attract top talent in a more passive type situation is to offer some advice for them. You know, how do you get into your industry? How do you do this kind of a job? Here's what's going on. Here's the hot new this or that in your particular industry. Share that sort of information. Help them to elevate themselves and to understand things a little bit better. Because when you give is when you get, right? So deliver that information that they want to know. And I think that they will be attracted to you and want to tether themselves to your organization so that when the time's right for you to bring them in, you already have a handle on who some of those folks might be. And of course, I think this goes without saying, but everything needs to be mobile, right? Your website needs to be mobile as far as, with your career site. Everything that you're doing needs to be able to translate to a smartphone or a tablet, right? Because otherwise you're going to frustrate potential employees and you don't want to drive them away before you ever had a chance to consider them. You know, when we talk about this, why is the recruiting experience so important, right? Here's why. One of the reasons is it's going to leave an impression on job candidates, everybody who comes your way, right? So how you differentiate your company, how you show what you offer, how you treat your job candidates, it's going to help you to attract the right people to help your organization succeed. But this is a marketing play as well, because these people, as they engage with you, could be consumers, or they could be influencers of consumers of your products and services. So you want to make sure that everything that you're doing from a talent attraction standpoint and that through that recruiting experience sets you up for success, both in the talent arena as well as the perceptions of your organization in the marketplace. So a lot of times, people are like, well, recruiting experience, what's that? Is there such thing as a recruiting experience? Sure is. And you want to make sure it's a good one, right? Because again, even if it doesn't work out for this job candidate this time, their experience can still be a good one. And then that person can then go and be an evangelist for your organization and helping to attract other people to your group. So some of the things that you need to think about is how easy is it to apply with your organization? You got a clunky process that's going to turn off candidates. This could be one of the first impressions of your company, so you want to make sure that it's a good one. And communication. Being timely in responding to applicants is important. Be transparent about what they can expect throughout the process. Let them know if there's going to be a delay, because good communication is what's going to set you apart from other potential employers. It's not that they expect that you're going to hire them within 24 hours or something like that, but they just need to know that they're moving through the process. We need transparency, we need honesty in this sort of thing. And you need some sort of mechanism to be able to track these applicants, because again, may not be right now to bring that person in. They may not be the best fit this time, but a good job candidate is going to be appreciative, I guess, of being informed of a better opportunity down the line. And with good applicant tracking, you can keep up with these people, right? And you can remember that, my silver medalist for this job would be perfect for that job, and be able to reach out and address them when the right fit comes along. Just means you're ready, right? Here's a couple of other things that we need to, when we're talking about the actual art of recruiting, that we need to talk about. And one of those things, well, you know what? If you don't understand your job, your candidates aren't going to understand it either, right? So before you post the opening, do some research, a little job analysis. I think educating yourself is going to help you to make the best hiring decisions. So you want to make sure that your job descriptions, your job postings, they're specific. They don't use the jargon. You want to list the qualifications that they must have, right? And maybe define what you must have versus what's nice to have, kind of that gift with purchase, if you will, because I think that's important for somebody to be able to see, can they fit into this? Maybe I don't have all of these things, but they're telling me right here it's not necessarily essential to success on the job. You also want to make sure that you understand what the salary is. We've got some legislation that's happening across the country that's enforcing the idea that we share salary with our candidates before they come on board with us. It's not the last little bit of negotiation in an effort to be pay transparent, to be able to demonstrate that up front. So you need to know, what is your salary for this particular job? What is the value of this job to your organization? And be able to articulate that. And then you also need to think of, where does this job fit in the scheme of things with my organization? Where might it change in the future? You know, again, we've got to be nimble in the post-2020 era. And so you want to make sure that you understand this job and the impact of the job on our organization. Because I think with all of these things, you're going to be in a better position to conduct really intelligent interviews, asking the applicants those kind of questions that you need to get the answer to, and being able to hire the best candidate to be your next employee. So when we're talking about that interview, I think that there's some things that we can do to make sure that we're getting the best candidates. I think, first of all, again, you know, having that comprehensive job description, you know, be really clear about the skills, the education, the job duties, those things that are necessary. That'll cut the wheat from the chaff, right? And so if you have a full-blown job description, tell you a little side note, with all the legislation that's going on around pay transparency, a lot of times when it comes to your jurisdiction, your state, your county, many times it's going to also say, insist that you have a comprehensive job description. So forewarned, forearmed, right? But some other things that you can do to get better candidates is to conduct either pre-employment screenings, those personality and cognitive assessments, hard skills testing, get the facts on the person by verifying their education, their employment history, their certifications, their accolades. And then when you're actually in the interview, go below the surface, right? Get insight on their career goals and their personalities. Are they going to be a complement to your company culture? Ask what type of environment and management style is going to work best for them. I think you want to ask those open-ended behavioral-based interview questions. It's a great way to draw out candidates' personalities, you know, because it's so easy for a candidate to recite their job history, their learned skills in an interview, but how did they react in certain situations? What kind of specifics can they offer regarding their achievements? How do they tailor their work styles to manage change? You need to ask those kinds of questions that are going to get you down to the finer details of candidate behavior, because at the end of the day, you're looking for people who can achieve results, right? And you're looking for people who fit well into your company culture. So you need those kinds of questions that give you that deeper insight into their personality, their capabilities, so you can narrow down to the best possible fit. So these are those kind of questions that tell me about a time when, or describe how you, so that you place that person in a situation, you learn what their action was and what was the result. It's a show and tell, right? Applicants should be able to show you examples of their work to go along with their experience, because if they can't, they might be exaggerating their history a little bit.
Hey, Jill, I just wanted to break in and ask a question
Sure.
about, do you have any advice for how do you translate values into your interview questions? So you can translate different skills and experience, but do you have any guidance for translating values to questions?
Yeah, so what I would say there is it's going to come more than you asking a question about it. It's going to come out in the way that they answer the questions that you ask. when they place themselves in a situation and they tell you why they were what they were doing or what task they were responsible for, and then they describe their action, they'll begin to give you clues in describing that action. Why did they pick that path? Why did they go that way? And that's really what values are, right? Do I turn right or do I turn left when I'm faced with a decision like this? And you'll be able to glean some of that information just in how they they answer those questions. Maybe your company, maybe that whole work-life balance thing, that's not something you guys are known for. And maybe it's a work in progress, or maybe no, maybe this is just the way we work. And so if you start to hear motivational answers like, well, I left that last job because they were working me like a dog, right? I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, that's a values kind of statement, right? And so being open and listening for those things, a lot of that will come out of the conversation itself. You know, and if you're not hearing it, you can ask, well, you took this course of action. Tell me why. Tell me how you made that decision. And again, I think that'll feed into your better understanding of how they operate, what value base they use to make their decisions and take action on. So,
Great, thank you.
No problem. And I love that. You guys ask questions. Love it. So you got two really good candidates, right? One has great skills. One seems to be a great fit for your organization. How are you going to decide between those two? I think that comes down to the person who's doing the hiring, right? And I think there's some questions that they need to ask themselves, that person who's doing the hiring and the person who's going to be training this new employee. Where are you willing to compromise? How much are you willing to teach, right? Who's going to be easier for you to train? And I think those questions and the answers to those questions are going to help you to make better hiring decisions. Because here's the bottom line. If your candidate doesn't mesh with your organization, it's not going to be easy to change somebody, right? But most people can pick up a new skill if somebody would invest a little time to train them. And I want to make an important distinction here. I said mesh with your culture. You're not looking to hire carbon copies of what you already have, right? You're looking to hire talent that believes in your mission, believes in your values, believes in your vision, but who bring a diversity of thought and experiences to bear on your organization. That's how you're going to go further faster. So it's a culture complement, right? That you're taking what you have and you're just expanding upon that. I don't think we can leave this topic without talking about remote recruiting. I think it's a staple now, and maybe some of us weren't as used to that before the pandemic, but you know, because always before, I think we started out with what, a phone screen. If the person seemed to fit the mold, seemed to have what they needed, he or she's called in for a face-to-face interview, but not today. Companies all over the world are working job candidates through the interview process on Zoom or Google Hangouts, Blue Jeans, whatever virtual platforms you can think of. And many have made some decisions to move to this kind of a hiring process full time. And so I think that this is just a new norm. Our candidates are getting used to it, and I think we need to get to a place where we're comfortable with it too, because you know, I think it can be a little intimidating, I think, but there's a few pros and cons that I just wanted to share, and some things maybe to think about as you move to a remote recruiting environment. Now, you can go completely digital with your recruiting and take all your processes to something that's much more virtual in nature. But I think where we're watching most people make their changes is around the interview, right? And doing that on using some form of technology to facilitate the interview. And so there's some cons, you know, awkwardness. You know, when you're using technology, maybe there's a glitch in it. Maybe you've got to troubleshoot something, and then that's stressful. But a lot of times with lags and things like that, then you know, it's just awkward, and so you need to be prepared for that and be able to get through that. And clearly, you don't get those nonverbal cues that you would have had if you were sitting across the desk from somebody. So it's harder to observe body language and get some of those other nonverbal signs, you know, that help us to understand a candidate's comfort level, help us to understand their confidence during the conversation. And then also, from the candidate's point of view, it's a very limited look-see at your organization, right? They're just going to be able to see the person that they're having the video chat with. Whereas if they were live in person, they could walk through the halls, they could see how other people are dressed, how they're interacting with each other, what the office environment looks like, that sort of thing. So, that's a bit of a con, I think. But I think the pros outweigh the cons. Because I think when we're thinking about recruiting remotely, think of how wide that makes our candidate pool, right? No longer are we worried about bringing somebody in, having to fly them, put them up in a hotel, do all those things with those extra expenses. So we can recruit virtually and not have any of those extra hiring costs. And also, I think that's a win on the part of the potential employee as well. Not time sitting in traffic, not time trying to get off work to go. You can facilitate this in a time and a schedule that works best for everybody, and cut out a lot of commuting and downtime. I also think that it's a wonderful advent for extending your employment brand. I think, number one, to your candidate pool, it says they're with it. They got on board this train, and I think that can help your employment brand. Just kind of your openness to technology and to the idea of video interviews. And everybody, to a last person that I've talked to that has engaged in remote recruiting, talks about the speed to hire, right? Everything's easier to schedule. You can move very, very quickly. And this is going to be an important distinction, because as this war for talent is heating up, candidates are going to go off the market quickly. So if you can interview right away, it's going to get you some better hires. And I think it's going to help you to land some people who might have been not available to you in times past. I also think there's another little pro that is just an aside, but it gives you a little bit of a behind the scenes impression of the people. I notice a lot of my Zoom meetings, we're all taking in people's backgrounds, where you sitting, what's that? Oh, there's your dog, whatever. And I think that how a candidate presents themselves in their own element can teach you a lot about their personalities. Especially if there's a disruption or a delay, some sort of digital hiccup, I think that's going to give you some really good insight into how they perform under pressure, right? So as we start to kind of wind down our conversation a little bit, I think we need to talk about what our candidate pool is going to be looking for, even what our own, our employees that we have now are going to be looking at. I keep saying post-COVID, but there's not a post-COVID, but as we kind of become a little bit more settled into the new ways of working. And quite frankly, if we're talking about talent, we're talking about recruiting, retention is a big part of that, right? It does you no good to bring them in the front door if they're just walking out the back door. So you have to constantly be re-recruiting those people who are working for you now. So let's talk a little bit about how COVID has not only changed how our work is being done today, right now, today, but also how it's going to continue to operate in the future. It's more than just being able to work easily from home, right? I think it's going to change the future of work and the expectation of our employees in a variety of ways. Well, I think one of those is this idea of a permanently flexible future, right? I think post-COVID, whatever, however you want to say that. Somebody help me with a really good way to describe what's next. But
we're calling it the new reality, Jill, is how we're speaking of it.
Okay, so our new reality then is going to be tempered by the fact that we've all already made our initial investments in the platforms and the technologies. And I think that that's going to lead us to a significant, a permanent transition to more remote working. I don't know that we'll all be remote 100% of the time, all the time, forever. There are some of us who are desperate to get back into the office, to see other people and to feed on that energy that we get from our coworkers being in the same space. But I do think that there's going to be an expectation for more flexibility around using technology in that work from home idea, right? We know it works. You can't tell me that it doesn't work for me to take a meeting sitting at my kitchen table, because I've just been doing that for months, right? So some of our arguments that we might have had for presentism and things like that, probably not going to hold as much water on the other side of this. So I think that our folks are going to be looking for more flexibility, not such a strict in-office or in-person workplace culture. I think that there's definitely an expectation that that's going to change. And the whole idea of work-life balance, those kind of are two sides of a bit of the same coin, right? I think that working from home is convenient, comfortable for a lot of us. But then that means sometimes it's difficult to separate home and life. Some people are doing a great job. But I think what it does for all of us is to begin to think about a results-only workforce. Really, that's where we live now, right? Because we can't see people. They look busy. I don't know if they look busy or not anymore because they're working from their homes. It's all about what they produce, right? It's all about their deliverables. And so getting away from that 8 to 5, getting away from some of that kind of structure is possibly what we're talking about here. Is that, yeah, I'll get my report done. When do we need the report? Okay, if I get it done at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if I take my kid to dance in between in between all this, so be it. It's about, did I meet my deadlines? Did I present the deliverables that I promised? And so I think people are going to be looking at that moving forward, because there's that pressure of trying to get the work-life balance. And I think all of this, these are going to be hygiene factors for people in the future to choose their employer. I think that here's an interesting factoid, though, and something that you may want to think about as you move forward with making your plans to return to the workplace or remote only. There's been a number of surveys done during this time that have shown us, kind of contrary to popular belief, but the younger generations are the ones struggling the most with work from home. And I think a lot of what that has to do with, because where we see the most marked differences in Gen Z, which are, the oldest one of a Gen Z was born like 1995, right? So, but we're seeing them struggle, and I think it's from structure, like a lack of structure and not being able to eyeball their manager when they need to. And so they're really, it's hard for them. They're anxious, they're eager to get back to work. But I think a lot of that is because they didn't have time in the office yet, right? They haven't built in their time management skills. They haven't baked in all those things that those of us that are in, let's say, the baby boomer or even Gen X, or even older millennial generation, that we've already been, we know how to do this. We know how to organize ourselves, and we know what the expectations are. But that age group is having some issues with staying on task and knowing how to effectively work from home. And so I think it's odd, right? Because they're digital natives. You'd think that they would have this stuff down pat, but I think it has a lot to do with structure. So when you're looking to make some decisions about remote only or some sort of flex in the office, think about that, because that's your future workforce, right? That's the future of your organization. So be mindful of what they need from that sort of thing. They want to go to the office because they want to be social with their coworkers. They're worried about becoming too isolated, if you will. And I think when we look at the other end of the spectrum, we're kind of okay. We don't mind staying home for long stretches of time. And so, but again, I think it has everything to do with experience. There is another point that I think some candidates will be looking at your organization, and it's around the idea of sustainability. It's no secret. We're breathing cleaner air. I live on Maui. We're seeing fish that we haven't seen in years in the ocean, closer to the islands. We're seeing coral reefs come back to life. We're seeing all sorts of things from, doing good for the planet because of some of the steps that we took during COVID. And so I believe that we've reduced the commutes of our folks for sure, but I think doing these sorts of things, reducing our carbon footprint, looking at energy consumption. I think these are going to be important factors for employees. How are you going to handle it moving forward? We're doing such a good job now. What are you going to do to wreck that, right? And that could be something that sticks with us beyond this pandemic. I definitely think HR practices are going to change. I've never seen such a collective head whip to look at HR as when we've gone through this pandemic. Everybody was scrambling to get to HR to say, what do we do? What do we do? How do we handle this? But I think that some of the lessons that we've learned, how some of our organizations have pivoted to do different things, how we began to look at all the stakeholders in our process, that it's more than just our shareholders that we're beholden to. We're beholden to our employees, we're beholden to our customers, and how we handled this pandemic is again going to be another factor that people are going to have an expectation. What did you do for your employees during this time? How did you handle these sorts of things? And we've seen examples of people who have done really well. We've seen some people who have botched it a little bit. And I think that that's going to be a question that people are going to ask. How did you handle the pandemic? And what did it mean to your various stakeholders? I think that it's a mind shift that we are starting to think about. It's not just what we do, but it's why we do it and how we do it is every bit as important as the what we do, I guess.
Hey, Jill, we have a lot of questions about recruitment, but I did want to ask one about this topic. So if the new normal is now to be flexible and there's not an 8 to 5 workday, how does a company avoid turning employees into a commodity? In other words, how does a company encourage or get full engagement and commitment from them to the firm?
Right. So my first answer, where I go immediately with a question like that, is to think about how energizing those projects can be for somebody, right? When we're talking about them being able to demonstrate what they've done and how it relates to the organization, that's what every employee wants to know, right? How do I fit in here? How do I make a difference at my organization? So when we move to something where we're really looking at results and they can see the needle move because of something that they did, I think that in and of itself is attractive to the employee and energizing for the employee and doing a lot for employee engagement. I can sit there and type at my keyboard 8 hours a day, look busy, but how uninspired is that, right? How not fun, especially for somebody like me, how not fun is that? But when we can point to, here's what you were able to do, here's why it's important to our organization, that in and of itself, I think, is the secret sauce to keeping people engaged. We all want to know that we're making a difference. And so with results only, you know that you did it. Did that answer your question? Sort of.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Okay. Oh, go ahead. And we do have a lot of questions about recruitment. So excited.
Okay. So great. So just real quick, as we move into those questions and answers about recruitment, I think we need to spend a little time about talking about reskilling and retention, because again, it's all part of the same conversation, right? And so we found, as we've moved through this time, that the best thing that we can do is try to anticipate, right, our next moves, right, to try to be more strategic about what's coming next. We know that there's a ton that's happening that's not within our control, but I think if we can begin to start thinking about how we'll pivot next time, what might be important, what do we need to leave behind, and what do we need to get better at in case the next pandemic, natural disaster, whatever might happen to us. So just to put a pin on it, when we talk about reskilling, that means that we're developing our employees, we're giving them additional skills to help them move to new roles, to be more agile, so that they can be more responsive to what's going on within our organization. So that's reskilling. When we talk about upskilling, that means that they're better at doing the job that they're doing right now, right? So I want to make that differentiation, and both are important, right? But I think that really this whole idea of reskilling people so that they can move, bob and weave with what's going on in the environment is really the key to that adaptability that we all need as organizations. So if we can have our folks be learners that are reacting to the market, gaining those new skills as the market begins to change, I think they're going to be that force for your organization that can shift, that can bend with anything that gets thrown at them. So, at the end of the day, they're just going to have that much more knowledge and things that you can leverage, I guess, in the future, so that you can get your organization through whatever gets thrown at you. So when we're talking about both upskilling and reskilling, I mean, how do you do it? Well, a lot of it has to do with collaboration, right? And I think now more than ever, innovation is important and collaboration is important, and especially if you're in a situation where you have less people, right? Maybe you're getting ready to hire again, but it's because you went through a reduction. So being able to share those best practices and collaborate on those things will help you to be able to replicate successes in the future. So whatever you can do to set up collaborative learning environments, I think will help your employees so that they can educate each other, if you will. And I also think that the more that you can connect people with subject matter experts, so that they can, your folks can quickly learn from the best. Maybe those are internal people, maybe those are external. Taking advantage of perhaps if you have some downtime in your organization right now, accessing other learning assets. There are a tremendous amount of assets that are available to us out on the internet, some for free and very high quality for free or very low cost. If you will. And so using this time to get some more formal learning too. And if you can clump that together, like here is a group of courses that we think that if you take this, you'll be better at emotional intelligence or whatever, whatever theme it is that you deem important to your organization. If you can curate that and offer it to them, make it easy for them to access, I think it's going to go a long way to not just retaining, because you're investing in these people and they will appreciate that, but also making sure that they're ready to help your company to grow to whatever's next. So with that, let's move to some questions, because it sounds like we've got some.
Yeah, we sure do. Okay, so we're going to start with, I love the idea of giving, you have to give to get in order to get top-notch talent. And we talk about in sales and selling, providing value to potential customers as part of the sales process. Can you give us more examples of how we can use this strategy or tactic to win new talent?
Right. So it's exactly the same approach, the same idea that that we have, in marketing to our consumers. So what is it that you think that they want? What do they need? What would make them interested in your organization? Is it tips about just getting a job in your industry? Is it tips about getting a job with you? Like maybe you have a video on there of your recruiter saying, here's some inside tips for how you get your resume reviewed by me, things like that could be helpful. And there were probably generic tips that would apply, no matter where, but that would be helpful. They would think they were getting some insight into your organization. It could just be giving access to more knowledge, helping people to better themselves no matter where they sit. But you're going to be perceived as somebody who's an expert in the industry. You're going to be perceived as someone who's got it going on, and people will be naturally attracted to your organization. So it's helpful tips either about the job search itself or about things in your industry that you think learning about those things would provide value to your potential talent pool. And again, they're not yours yet, but you're sowing seeds. And if they do connect with your organization, if they do come on board, then maybe you've given them something that's going to make them more successful when they get there.
Okay, great. And Jill, can I just ask you to turn your webcam on? We turned it off for latency issues, so we'd love to see your face during this time. Great. So we talked about creating a list of requirements for employees. And one of the questions we had in advance is, how can you recruit employees to travel to projects outside of their home state? And I think in the pandemic, it's such an interesting question of if that's a requirement. So can you share a little bit about that as a requirement and how to work through that?
Yeah, and you know, so much of that is going to be driven by you know, what's going on in the places where you need to send them and what the perceptions are of that. So maybe it's important for you to do a little PR about what's really going on, boots on the ground kind of education, because I think sometimes, you know, we can listen to the headlines and kind of get a little concerned or a little more stirred up, and maybe it's not even the real case. So maybe doing some things around the idea of giving them a good picture of what that really looks like. In some cases, that transparency, just the transparency alone, can go a long way with having the talent be more invested in you and your processes because they appreciate that level of transparency. It's probably going to be a little bit of a struggle to be able to find those people who are willing to jump on an airplane or to do some of these things. You know, it wouldn't bother me at all. Matter of fact, I fly a lot and have flown a lot during the pandemic. But other people, yeah, they're going to be sitting in a different space. So I think the more education that you can give them about where they're going, why they'd be going there, why it would be necessary travel, and what they could expect on the other side may help you to encourage people to take those steps.
Great. Okay, well, I was going to ask a question about rigor in the hiring process, and I actually have a couple questions around that. Okay. One is, do you think hard skills testing is considered a best practice in the hiring process?
I think it's position driven. I think that there are times where it's going to be essential that somebody understands a piece of technology, is able to do math or whatever those skills might be, in which you know, it's important for you to know that they're going to be able to contribute from the day that they get on the job. Other positions, maybe not so much, but I think when it is necessary, it is necessary. And definitely that's a best practice in those particular areas. So if it's something that you must have and they must be at a certain level to be successful on the job, if that's one of your key requirements, you know, I have no problem with asking somebody to prove it, that you actually know how to work Excel better than I do or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the other side, in terms of rigor in the hiring process, is any pre-hire assessments. So what are your thoughts on assessment fatigue? For example, too many assessments, behavioral, cognitive skills, you know, what do you think about that?
I would only look for one instrument, you know, and that does the best at whatever it is that you're trying to get to. You know, we've heard over the summer a lot about DE&I, right? And I do know that if we are using personality and cognitive assessments and we can push them to kind of the front of our process, it can help with being more inclusive in who you are bringing into the organization, right? Because, you know, those aren't, those tests don't discriminate, right? And so it has been a very helpful key for a lot of organizations to add that and add it early on into the process to make sure that their funnels are accepting as many candidates as possible. So we're a firm believer at Insperity in personality and cognitive assessments, but as you say, a little can go a long way. And so really just focus on what it is that you need to know about that. And identify the instrument that's going to best speak to that. There's no reason to make them go through 3 or 4 of them. Just pick one that's got the most impact on your organization.
So if an organization has historically been made up of a particular type of individual, we know this, and now that, you know, we're making that realization that we want to make that diversity, how do you find top-notch candidates to make the organization more diverse?
Right. So I want to be clear in that we don't say, oh, we're shy of these people and those people, so I need this new job that's opening tomorrow to look like the person who takes this job looks like this, right? Because that in and of itself is discriminatory. So what we want to do is open the funnel so wide that so many people can get in that even if we have a leaky funnel, we've got so many people that started with the process that we're bound to have diversity in those that fall through the funnel. So it's still about hiring the right person for the job from a skills standpoint, from all of that sort of thing. But if they fit a protected class, if you will, that's a bonus, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't want to go out with, we must have one of these. So I want to be clear about that. But knowing that you may have, be lacking in a certain area of bringing ideas and talents from certain backgrounds and certain perspectives into your organization, well, then think about opening that funnel to that group. Fish where the fish are. So I'm just going to use a very top of mind example. But let's say that our diversity initiatives show that we are missing people of color. And we don't like that. And so we want to make some changes. So are we reaching out to historically Black colleges? You know, are we using those folks, their job boards, that sort of thing to bring people into the funnel? Again, it's about attracting them into the funnel, and then as they move through, there's a phenomenon that happens that has been proven time and time again. It's called two in the pool. And if you have more people at the top of the funnel and more people coming through the funnel, then if you get to your, I'm going to tell you a number, and I'm not sure that I'm going to quote the right number, so don't write this down, anybody, but just know the thought behind it. But if you have at least two female candidates in the pool as you get to your finalist round, you're something like, I think it's 79% or 79 times more likely to hire a female into that role. If you've had enough in the process that they fall out to having two finalists. When we talk about minorities, if you have at least two minorities, I do know this number, it's 194 times more likely that you will select a person of color into the finalist job if you can just get them into the funnel and out to the end. So a diversity audit can be a helpful thing to see kind of maybe where in our processes we're taking the missteps that's keeping us from having the kind of diversity that we desire.
Great.
That's a long answer to that question.
Yeah, when you talk about a funnel and the different types of positions that you might be hiring for, what advice do you have for hiring trade type positions? I mean, we talked about culture complement, but in a trade type position, skills and experience are going to be really important. So what advice do you have there?
So again, it's fish where the fish are. If you need those skills, if you need the people to come in with those skills, they're not skills that you can train on the job or create some sort of intern or apprenticeship programs and things like that. Then, you know, it's again, it's going out, it's going to where they hang out, using additional tools to try to attract people who may not be thinking about your organization or making a change in what they're doing, but then they get intrigued by something that you've put out there. So using your social media channels, doing some of these things, hanging out where they hang out. You know, talk to your high pos in those areas, your best employees. And what do you do on the weekend? What do you do when you're not at work? What do you know, how do you do things? And start kind of living their life and understanding that that may be a place to recruit from, to bring that talent into your organization. Because, you know, there's not one solution for everything. You can't just go post on some big job board and hope that you're going to get everything that you want. You've got to be resourceful in identifying those sourcing solutions.
Yeah, and in a prior life, I worked for an organization, and we actually were recruiting through a local church where there was a high concentration of people of color, and that actually was very effective at the time.
Yeah. So just be thoughtful of where you're putting your messaging out, and to try to attract people into your organization.
So, All right, so we have a question about looking at someone's work history. So when interviewing a candidate that has a resume with a lot of turnover, should this be a concern nowadays? So many resumes have turnover, and we don't want to hire someone that's illustrated changing jobs, but is that more commonplace now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, some of that's going to be industry driven, right? You know, if I'm particularly technical, I may have to change jobs a lot because my companies change, right? Like sometimes with some of these tech organizations, are they a project or are they a company? I don't know. But once the project's over with, maybe they sell to Facebook or something, and there is no more company. And so I think you just have to. I don't think you can put your biases up when you start to see that. I think you need to investigate a little bit more as to maybe some of the reasons behind those moves. It is no secret that as our younger generations have come into the workforce, that there is an idea that they move around a lot more than those of us who, and they don't just move around from job to job, but they'll change what they're doing, right? It's not like there's a thread of some of the sameness going through all their jobs, but they're literally making big changes as they move from job to job. So there is still job hopping, and that is a red flag. But I think before you assume, you need to double check that there's not more behind the moves, the reason for the moves. I think something that you could notice if you're doing a resume review, and you not only notice the job hops, but you see gaps in between each of those roles, I think that would be more of a red flag than if they moved from one thing to another, because a lot of companies have not done a really good job of giving their employees insight into how they can move within their own organization. We're all talking about this now, that internal mobility piece, right? Why would I want them to go across the street if they were really seeking more challenge, more this, more that? Can't I find that here in our organization? But a lot of us have been slow to be able to share with our employees what else is available for them, so they feel like they have to leave to be able to get the challenges that they desire. So bottom line, don't assume.
Okay.
You know, try to figure out what it's all about.
All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of our time together. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, Jill. And we will share a link to the recording and the slides in just 24 hours from now. We'll also include a link to register for next Friday's webinar, Decision Factors 2020, the CEO's Climb to Recovery. In this webinar, Vistage Chief Research Officer Joe Galvin and myself discuss the top areas of concern among small and mid-sized businesses and actions you can consider for your strategic planning. I hope you can join us next Friday. Thank you once again for your time, and stay safe.